Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, June 27th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 64 days, the game against Michigan in 155 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. On today's show, we're bringing back a popular show from last year. Would just sort of take new rankings as they came out and just sort of let you see what that might look like if things played out like that in terms of the 12-team college football playoff format. And going to be doing that again this year. Going to take the Phil Steele rankings. The Phil Steele magazine just came out just in the last week or so. So you're going to take his top group of teams and put them on the bracket, let you see, because things are going to look a little different this year. One thing that does not look a little different, we're going to be doing this exercise with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, we saw how this went last year. Worked out just fine for Ohio State. This year, though, the committee, they made, and the schools and all that, they made a small change to how the teams are going to be actually put on the bracket. So let people know about that.
Yeah, the change this year is they've gone away from the bye situation that they ran into last year. And so this year they've changed some things, and the four highest ranked teams, conference champs, will have the byes. Correct, Tom?
It's so the change this year is that they are getting rid of the top four seeds must be conference champions. So it'll be just the top four ranked teams in the rankings. So last year you had teams like Boise State getting a first round bye, even though they were ranked something like 10th or 11th in the actual rankings. This year, it is just going to be 1, 2, 3, and 4, and theoretically, it could be 4 Big Ten teams or 4 SEC teams getting those first 4 byes. Probably not going to be exactly that, but certainly something that addresses one of the weirder facets of last year's rankings, where you'd have Penn State having to go play a home game. And then they had to go and play Boise State, a rested Boise State team who had run the gauntlet of the Mountain West Conference. So definitely a little bit of a different setup this year, probably, addressing one of the weirder elements of last year's, where I think they sort of figured out, hey, this is probably not going to work well, and they addressed it quickly. So, okay. So we'll run through Phil Steele's top teams, and this is going to we'll run straight through the top 16 teams, because that will get you through all of the teams that are going to be on the bracket in just a second. Number 1, Penn State. They would be the presumptive Big Ten champions in this case. Number 2, Clemson. They would be the ACC champions in this case. Number 3, Notre Dame. They are just an at-large team. Number 4, Texas. They would be the SEC champion. Number 5, Ohio State. Number 6, Georgia. Number 7, Alabama. Number 8, Oregon. Number 9, Oklahoma. Number 10, Michigan. Number 11, LSU. Number 12, SMU. Number 13, Baylor. They are the Big 12 champion. I'm mentioning that because the top 5 conference champions do get in. Just like last year, they do get in. They just don't get one of the top 4 seeds automatically. So number 14, Miami. Number 15, Boise State. They would be the Group of 5 champion representative. And then number 16, Illinois. So now, here's what that would look like on the bracket. You've got number 1, Penn State, number 2, Clemson, number 3, Notre Dame, number 4, Texas, all having first round byes. The most interesting stuff here is the stuff at the bottom of the bracket. Number 11, Baylor, they ranked in Phil Steele's rankings behind LSU, but Baylor's in and LSU is not, because Baylor's in the Big 12 and they need a Big 12 representative. And then SMU ranked ahead of Baylor. SMU ranked ahead of Boise State as well. Miami ranked ahead of Boise State. Doesn't matter. Boise State gets that last spot. First 4 out. LSU, SMU, Miami, Illinois. Tony, your thoughts on how this potential playoff would lay out?
Well, being the 5 seed doesn't seem as advantageous as it did a year ago. I'll say that, looking at what that second round matchup leads to. And overall, like that, you look at the Penn State being the 1 seed, and I think Oklahoma and Oregon maybe wouldn't mind being in that situation, but that's maybe my own disbelief about Penn State. But I always love this, although the Baylor Georgia looks a little like, but it's got to be somebody from the Big 12. Like, somebody's got to be there. And then, of course, Michigan and Alabama. Feels like we've done that one quite a lot already.
Yeah, there are some rematches on here. The first round matchups would be Friday, December 19th. You'll have one game, just like last year. That Friday night game was Indiana and Notre Dame. This year, it'll be one of these games, but it'll be number 5 Ohio State versus number 12 Boise State, number 8 Oregon versus number 9 Oklahoma, number 6 Georgia versus number 11 Baylor, and number 10 Michigan visiting number 7 Alabama. So you've got some really interesting matchups there. I do look at those matchups and think, boy, that's a lot of SEC and Big Ten. And you've got, so of the teams in there, the only ones that are not SEC or Big Ten teams are Boise State, Baylor, and Clemson. That none of the Big Two conferences would, under these rankings, not have any at-large teams. So it'd be 9 teams from the Big Ten and the SEC put together. Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State from the Big Ten, Alabama, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Texas from the SEC. I forgot about Notre Dame. So it'd be 8 of 12 from the two kind of power conferences. And, looking at this, I think a couple things jump out. As you mentioned, the Alabama-Michigan rematch from the Rose Bowl just a couple years ago. Ohio State would just need to beat Boise State to set up a rematch of their Week 1 game against Texas. And, we always talk about, will the committee try to avoid rematches and maybe seed things to avoid rematches? I don't know how possible that's going to be if 8 of the 12 teams are going to be from 2 conferences.
Well, and I'm looking at this, and if Brett Yormark would look at this, would he start to wonder maybe that 5+11 that he likes is not all that not favorable to the Big 12? And frankly, I don't know how favorable it is to the ACC, but you see in the first 4 out in a 16-team playoff, you'd get 2 more ACC teams in there. But overall, like, the Big 12 is, I don't know that 5+11 is going to work out for them as well as he thinks they will. And maybe 2 guaranteed spots wouldn't be such a bad thing for the Big 12. The ACC may look at it and be like, we can do better. But, you look at this, and personally, I look at the 4 teams that are around thinking, I wouldn't mind seeing them in some sort, form, or fashion in this playoff. So I'm certainly a proponent of the 16 team, but overall, and then to see like Notre Dame and Clemson kind of, and the other teams just waiting in the wings, I guess maybe it's a little bit better than last year, in terms of the teams that are waiting with the buys. But it's going to be fascinating to see if the buys actually work out for those teams this year.
Yeah, I still look at this year. I look at the 5-12 and 6-11 matchups and think that those sure look like these teams are going to be 3-touchdown favorites or 17-point favorites. Ohio State against Boise State, Georgia against Baylor. After that, you get a little closer in some of the other ones. We'll just sort of advance people through, and we're not going to update the bracket, but we'll just, if the higher seeds all win, Ohio State would play Texas in the quarterfinal, 5 versus 4. Oregon would play Penn State in the quarterfinal, 1 versus 8. Georgia would play Notre Dame. That would be a 3-6. And then Alabama would play Clemson. That would be a 2-7. And this is the last year that these quarterfinal games are going to be controlled by the existing bowl contracts, bowl TV deals. So Penn State, that 1 versus 8 matchup, that would be in the Rose Bowl. Texas, the SEC champion, would go to the Sugar Bowl. The Clemson game, that would be the Orange Bowl under the ACC's contract. So then Notre Dame would be sort of the odd man out, and they would be playing in the Cotton Bowl. So that's going to be, just like last year, 1 on New Year's Eve and 3 on New Year's Day. The Rose Bowl is going to be in that late afternoon slot. The Sugar Bowl is going to be in that evening slot on New Year's Day. So I would guess that you're probably going to see. I'm going to say they're going to. I can't believe Notre Dame and Georgia would be a noon game on New Year's Day, but it's either that or they put it in New Year's Eve, which is also not a great time to have a game on TV necessarily.
And wasn't that the game this past season that had to be pushed a day because of the attack there? So, you've got the Ohio State Texas rematch. Oregon and Penn State would be a rematch because they play in Happy Valley this year with the whiteout, I believe. These are all very, very big games and very big names, and including Alabama and Clemson. And Clemson opens the season against an SEC team in LSU this year. So I think that quarterfinals gives you just kind of what you want in terms of big names. The only problem is you've seen these games. You've seen half of the games already this season, but certainly not at the stakes of these games, and probably not with the crowds in terms of the atmosphere. But there are some special things about a 50-50 crowd, like the Ohio State Georgia game in Atlanta, which wasn't 50-50, but the Ohio State fans tried to make it 50-50. Some of those places get really, really fun, but overall, I guess, Tom, as we know, it's difficult to beat a team twice in the same season. Is that correct?
I heard something about that. I saw something about that in Pasadena on the first day of this year as well. So we'll, again, this is just sort of one possible thing. So I'm not going to get too worked up over rematches because, again, there's lots of different ways this could change, and they can always slide slide a team one line one way or the other on the bracket to avoid those rematches. If you advance everyone again, advance the higher seeds, you got a Penn State Texas playoff semifinal on one side of the bracket and a Notre Dame Clemson playoff semifinal on the other side of the bracket. And based on the way they have traditionally done these, the top rated seed, the top seed, which in this case would be Penn State, would get the preference. So they would get the closer site to their campus. So Penn State and Texas would play in the Peach Bowl, and Clemson and Notre Dame would play in the Fiesta Bowl. And then your national championship, again, if we just slot ahead the top two seeded teams, Penn State, Clemson, go back 12 months in time and say either James Franklin or the guy who absolutely refuses to use the transfer portal, one of them is guaranteed to win the national championship, which that would be the case. That game will happen in Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami. So it could be, someone could play in that stadium twice in the span of 3 weeks. That was the case as well last year with the game down in Atlanta. Could have played in the Peach Bowl and also the national championship this year. Could be the Orange Bowl and the national championship. I think my biggest takeaway of all of this is just with the playoff quarterfinals now just being the top four seeds just being the top four teams, you get a lot more helmet matchups, and you don't have the Penn State, Boise State quarterfinal game like you did last year. It feels like those could be just really titanic brands, titanic programs all facing off, and that could make that New Year's Day and New Year's Eve feel much more consequential than it did for long stretches last year.
You would hope that the off week, the bye week, would be more beneficial, and it's more than just a week, but it would be more beneficial for those four teams because you're looking, and I wonder how many of them would be favorites in their games, and probably most of them, I would think. Whereas, I don't know that was anybody favored last year that had the bye week.
I don't think so.
So that in itself is a very different situation. So yeah, it's like for an Ohio State, you get this big win at home, and it's like, all right, there's no let up as there was last year. But like for Penn State or whomever that had the fortunate run, it's like there's a let up the following week, so it's like you'll be okay. I don't see much of that in this run, so I think we all agreed with the moves and thought it was a good move to eliminate the automatic buys for the conference champs, but they still get in. And Tom, the conferences still get the money as if they got their buys into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, so good news. Everyone's getting their money, so it'll all work out. So yes, that's your sort of first look at this. We'll do another couple of these as we go through, as the AP Top 25 comes out or whatever, because I'm sure there will be some different lists coming out. And I think the most interesting thing is going to be how little changes on those could end up with very different looking results on this bracket. So we'll have a little bit of that for you coming up a little later on this summer, but we'll also have all sorts of coverage for you coming up at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Busy recruiting time right now, some potential commitments announcing very soon in the coming days. We'll have coverage of all of that for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com, as well as coverage of heading into the 2025-2026 season. Buckeyes, as you can see on that bracket, projected to be a strong national championship contender at the end. We will be there for all of those games, covering it all for you at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.